He's got to watch what he says around me. I do remember, short term, not long. He is also someone who very much walks his talk, is compassionate and clear, and does the work that is the work that needs to be done internally and then outwardly. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. A soon-to-be minister, correct? 2 years. Oh, you've got eons to go yet. Well, good morning. The first thing I'd like to say is how incredibly honored I am to be here, truthfully. I've been a devotee of the Gordons for many, many years, and I used to travel back and forth from Palm Desert, California to my home in Kelowna, British Columbia. I took all of my ministerial training in Palm Desert with Dr. Tom Costa, and I would travel back and forth 2 or 3 times a year up I-5. So Redding was the 12-hour halfway stop on our way home with our 2 little kids, and so we would always stay in Redding, and I love the community. It's always been something which has magnetized me, and the other thing is I love the spiritual community that's here. Dr. Gordon, both of them, really helped set the stage and the foundation for what we have in spirituality as far as our organizational structure goes today. And it was through Dr. James, as a matter of fact, that we had such great people like Dr. Jeffrey Proctor and Dr. Jane Ryder Howard, all of these people coming from this center. And I was enamored and in love with all of them for all that period of time. The first time I was here, the bookstore was in the back of the room. And I am just absolutely amazed at the work that you've done. It is such a demonstration of the dedication and the privilege that you have to be able to build this community and to develop it to the way that it is. I absolutely love your walking circle outside. It's a fantastic job. And I know that you're between ministers and that it probably feels a little bit challenging at this particular point to have all of that invested, that energy and that time. And I'd like to celebrate Reverend Mary and Reverend Sue, who have worked so diligently to maintain and keep this together. And I'd say I don't even know why you're candidating for a minister with those two. If I was manipulative and wanted to make things happen the way that I think they should happen, but this is the problem. This is the topic. This is the way we're going to talk. When we talk about tending the soul of the center, we're talking about tending the soul of not only the center here, the church center, but we're talking about tending the soul of the center within each of us as individuals and tending the soul of the center of the world itself. Everything has all of this lineage that goes with it. It starts in the micro and moves forward to the macro, and there are all the different passages that we go through on our way there. And that is the development of being able to bring forward into the life the truth of who we are. I said at the first service, and I rarely repeat services, and I don't think I'm going to do it today, but I'm going to do my best to get the general gist of it. I said at the service that we all realize and we all understand, just through basic biology, that everything in life has a purpose. Everything in life is there for a reason. I remember when I was living in Palm Desert, California, farming south of Indio, actually. I say Palm Desert. I was living in thermal California. Thermal. And, right at the north end of the Salton Sea, next door to La Quinta. And I had a farm there for a while. And it was hot. It was hot. And some brilliant person sometime in the past had imported from Saudi Arabia in order to be able to pollinate the date trees in that area. They'd brought in gnats, little tiny gnats. Do you have gnats here? Oh, well, bless the gnats. Anyway, they'd brought them in from Saudi Arabia, and they put them in to pollinate the date palms. And as much as this was known as the Coachella wave, as irritating as they were, I knew that they had a purpose in life and a purpose in being. And we know that from everything. Everything in the circle and the cycle of life has a purpose. That one is there to support another, there to support another. And it's all part of a large mosaic that when coming together works in perfection with a natural balance in life around us. And everybody knows that everything's created for a purpose in the human form, with the exception of this. I sometimes find through our past history of being told that we had dominion over the earth and that sense of separation that somehow or other we're not connected to it, which is a separation which projects out into all of our experiences, that everything in the world has a purpose with the exception of human beings. And so what I'm telling you is that you have a purpose, and that that purpose is grand, and that you fit in perfection to the mosaic of what goes on. And that because our purpose in life for the Centers for Spiritual Living is to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence, and because our vision is to create a world that works for everyone, and because our mission is to provide spiritual tools for individual and global transformation, I know that when we do that and come to that point, what will happen is we will create or recreate heaven on earth, because we will fit into that mosaic where we need to fit. Our problem and our challenge is that we're not certain about what our purpose is as humans. Dr. Holmes said you are bound because you are first free. And the freedom that we have is we have the freedom to believe that somehow or other we're outside of that cosmic wonder. We're outside of the infinite universal flow of life itself. And that we're different because of it. And so throughout history, what has happened is that we have developed in our means and our way of being, we have developed certain mechanisms within how we act, certain defense mechanisms or offense mechanisms that protect us from the sense that somehow or other we're not complete, not connected. Are we all on the same page? Yes. Good. I tell my wife that people ask me about, I've got a 39-year relationship with my wife, and they say, how do you manage to stay together? And I say, you know, we're not always on the same page, we're not always in the same chapter, but at least we're always in the same book. But to get back to the authenticity of the human being and the authenticity of what's going on. Oftentimes people wonder how we create a world that works for everyone. I'll tell you is that it will work in perfection the moment that you fit your purpose and embrace your concept and become actualized and authentic. Because at that particular point, what will happen is that you will fit and I will fit into the mosaic of life in perfection, and it will all unfold and take place. But what occurs for us is that we have all these various little things that show up in our life that we protect ourselves from. We run into conflict often, and we run into scrapes, and we disagree, and we have judgment, and we have opinion, and we feel wronged, or we feel we might wrong someone. We are defensive and offensive in the nature on how we live our lives instead of actually being the truth of who we are. And I used to say that if everybody just told the truth, that we would live in a world that works for everyone. The problem is that you have to define that term truth. Because oftentimes people think what their truth is isn't really their truth because it's shaded by all the layers that go beyond it. And you've heard the concept of somebody coming forward just to speak their truth to you, which generally, in my case, it means, oh, I don't really want to hear this. And I shy away from it, and my defense mechanism comes up. And that's the way it is. And that's the nature of it. So I don't really sponsor the fact that everybody should just tell the truth. What everybody should do is live the truth of who they actually are. And that's a totally different thing. And it's the determination and the discovery of that foundation of that really unfolds to create a world that works for everyone. And that works and begins within us as individuals. It begins within us. I look at our purpose and our vision, and I realize that for me it is so vitally important to live those purposes. I'll share something with you, is that, some of you might know that a couple of years ago what we did was we integrated two religious organizations that had been separated for almost 60 years. That we brought them together and made them connect and that made them cohesive, and we're still working on it. We're only 18 months into it, but it took us 7 or 8 years to do it, to bring the two that had split for various reasons off. And people would ask me, well, what my motivation was behind it. And my motivation behind it was the realization that I needed to be unified within my own heart and my own soul in the first place. And I'll tell you what happened was I was invited to do a thing called the Abraham Walk. I was invited to walk. Abraham is a walk that was put together. Apparently, Abraham, the prophet, walked from Constantinople to Jerusalem. And Abraham was the father of the three religions, which is Christianity, Hinduism, and Judaism. And so that he's the common leader of the three of them. And to demonstrate a solidarity, how those three should come together, how maybe perhaps the Jews and the Muslims should get along better, what they did was they put forward this walk called the Abraham Walk, and they invited me to take part in the Abraham Walk. And when I asked them what the purpose was, and I found out that it was to give an example of how we can walk together, so that what we can do is we can encourage the Jews and the Muslims to come together in harmony in Palestine, I was actually offended. And the reason I was offended was, how dare I have the arrogance to believe that I could take part in that walk to tell somebody else how to come together, specifically when my own organization was split in two in the first place. And so the realization was that I need to bring this, and I need to find a way to be able to unify those two, to bring them to a healing. And the root word of healing is the whole, to bring it to wholeness. There needs to be a way to do it. And we started off on it, and we've had great success, but like I said, we still have separation and differences that are going on. And for me, it is a matter of constantly working with those differences and realizing the truth behind it. And the only truth that I have behind it is to ask myself this question: what is the purpose of this? Why are we doing this in the first place? And the purpose for it is to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence, and the vision is to create a world that works for everyone. So as I move through this job that I have as the spiritual leader, and I'm seeing from different sides, different complaints, different squabbling, different whining, different stuff, Do you have stuff like that in your life? I guess so. So we kind of walk through it, and the realization is that if I allow that to become part of my life, if I allow that to enter into my being and into my experience, then believe me, I am going to be so sidetracked. I'm going to spend so much time dealing with the petty minutiae of what's going on that odds are really good I'm going to lose sight of the goal. I'm going to lose sight of the vision. I'm going to lose sight of the purpose. I will tell you the purpose of your being. The purpose of your being is to awaken. And the reason that it is to awaken is so that what you can do is you can fit into that mosaic of life in its perfection, so that you can create a world that works for you. The purpose of this church organization, this center, is to awaken you within the body of the container, so that what you can do is you can create a world that works for everyone and put it out into the world. And the purpose of the larger organization is to do that for the world itself. It is the micro to the macro, and there are all the different parts and pieces that fit in it all the way along the line. Now, you might not believe that that's your purpose, but I will tell you something, is that everything that you have in your life is born from awakening in the first place. You awaken to a new idea. Raymond Charles Barker once told me that when he ran into conflict in his life and he began to get pressured by it, that he would walk off into his den and close the door, and he would say, "Barker, you need a greater idea." And we have the greater idea in our purpose. It lays out before us. But if you're anything like I am, and I don't want to lay anything on anybody else, I'll take full responsibility for my being, but I head towards the vision, I remember the vision, I think there's a vision, And when I take my eye off it in the day-to-day piece of life, suddenly what I do is I transform my vision and I fall back into the minutiae again. And I surrender that. So you know what? I'm actually willing to allow certain things to happen in my life and give certain things up in my life that do not meet what I'm going for. Years ago, my wife and I, we got in a fight. We got in an argument. Like I said, I have a 39-year relationship with my spouse. And we got in this argument, and it was over something so petty. It was like not putting the toothpaste lid back on the toothpaste. I mean, it was so small. And so I get mad in the middle of the whole thing, and I remember I stormed out of the house, and I got into my car, and I drove away. And I was driving down the street, and I was driving along, and clarity started to come to me. And here's what it said. It said, you're really willing to give up your wife, your home, your children? You're really willing to give up the love and the connection that you have because of a toothpaste tube? And so I turned around and I went home. And we healed it. We brought it to wholeness. And yet that's what we do. Is that not correct? Our tendency is that we let the smallest thing disturb us and distract us from the vision of our life and the vision of our being. We allow something so trivial to prevent us from achieving what it is that we want. We can create heaven on earth right here and right now. We really can. You know, first off, there's enough food and water in this world to feed and have everyone have enough water. There's no shortage of it. I'll tell you, I did a talk at the World Parliament of Religions in 2009, and my job was to speak. I was given the job. People give me titles. And I was given the job to talk about the sustainability of food and water in the world. So I did my homework and I thought about it. And I'd been a farmer, remember, in Southern California. And when I was a farmer in Southern California, what I knew was that I'd grown 10 acres of onions, just 10 acres of onions. From that 10 acres, I'd created 1 million pounds of onions. 10 acres, 3 months, 1 million pounds of onions. Then I saw these large corporate farms, and they would have 640 acres, and they'd be in full production. And they'd just about be ready to harvest. And what they would do is they would go on their computers, they would look up the price of the commodity, they would find out that the price on the commodity was lower than what it would cost them to be able to harvest it. So what they would do is the next morning, rather than lose money, they would put 6 bottom plows into the field, and they'd put that 640 acres under the ground, and it'd be gone. 10 acres, 1 million pounds of onions, 640 acres. And this wasn't just occasionally. This was every season with 5 or 6 or 7 major farmers. That's what they would do. And the reason was simple. It cost more to harvest. They would lose more money if they harvested than put it under the ground. So I said to them, why don't you give the food away? Why don't you give it to the poor? So, well, then that would ensure that there'd be no market for it. And they'd never have enough money, so they couldn't grow another crop, which makes perfect sense in the capitalist system. And I'm not, believe me, I am a raving capitalist. But I love money. But the thing is that I don't like what I have to do to get it sometimes. But that's the point. And so I said, well, then, if it's going to disrupt the North American market, why don't we pack it into ships and send it overseas, where there is no market anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. I said, we don't have the money to put it into the ships, and we don't have enough ships. So I realized at that particular point that the problem was not food. We've got plenty of capacity to create all the food there is in the world. Everything that's needed, we can do. Isn't that the teaching? Is that it's already present, it's already there. It's just the openness of our mind to allow it to be so. And so there it is. So now there's a perfect example of it. And so, you know, up until about 2008, if somebody had asked me why we can't feed the world, I would tell you the problem was money. But in 2008, when the banking system imploded, and we had a war in Iraq and a war in Afghanistan, all of a sudden we had $3 trillion going out that came from somewhere. $3 trillion could feed 7.5 billion people for 6 months. Tell you, at $1 trillion, you could bring 7.5 billion people, pay for their flight, pay for their hotel room, bring them to Reading, and they could sit here in this audience. 1 trillion. That's every human being, man, woman, and child on this planet. That's how much money that is. And so what we would do is, in the world, probably 10 trillion, I think is what they estimated, $10 trillion to save a system that was imploding. Now you see, that's not keeping your eye on the vision. That's not maintaining where you're going. Our problem isn't food. Our problem isn't water. Our problem isn't technology. Our problem isn't medical care. Our problem isn't education. Our problem isn't money. Our problem is the willingness and the desire to bring into creation what it is that we want, instead of trading it off for the triviality of the fear that's brought forward in our lives, because God only knows we don't want something different. Am I making sense? And that's the macro picture that we're working to transform, but you go down to the micros all the way down through it. And when you get to the micros, what we find is we trade ourselves off as individuals for the fears. We leave our relationship for the sake of a toothpaste tube. We allow the minutia to drag us where we're going instead of maintaining and tending the soul of our vision and heading towards it no matter what. And this is the key as to how we can transform this world. It's the key as to how we move. We begin within our own self and our own being. And what a wonderful opportunity in a church waiting for a new minister. I'll bet you there's tons of little backfighting and stabbing going on in this church. Well, I've observed it over the years. It's present, it's there, because it's human nature. It's human nature to allow those little things to go. You're going to give up your principles, give up your teaching, give up your faith, give up your belief because of something minor, and the answer most times is yes. You want to hear a joke? It's a bad joke. It's a joke about these guys in this ship, and they're like 15 months at sea. And they're floating along. They haven't seen land, so they're just looking for land all over the place. And finally, from the crow's nest, the guy yells out, "Land ho, land ho." And they all look off, and sure enough, in the horizon, they can see just the beginning of a silhouette of an island and a little bit of smoke coming up. So the captain steers the ship towards there, and as they get closer, they see that it actually is an island indeed, in the middle of nowhere. And they get a little bit closer, and they see that there's a big bay in front of them. And a little bit closer yet, and they see that there's 3 buildings with the smoke coming up from one of them. And a little bit closer, and they see a guy standing on the beach, waving his arms and jumping up and down. And so they come in, and they drop anchor in the bay, and they lower a boat, and they send the boat ashore, and they get there, and this guy's saying, "Oh, thank God you're here." He said, "You know, I have been 15 years here shipwrecked. Not another human being on this island. I'm all by myself. 15 years I've been here." He said, "It's just incredible, and I'm so grateful that you're here. You finally saved me." And the sailors who got off, they're looking around, and they say, "Well, it's great, 15 years. I see you've got 3 buildings." And he said, "Yeah." "So what are the buildings?" And he says, "Well, that one's my home." They say, "Oh, so you built a home, yeah?" He said, "Well, what's that building?" "Well, that's the church I go to." Say, "Oh, that's the church you go to. So what's the other building?" Say, "Well, that's the church I used to go to." We are a crazy group of Meshuggahs. So the point, though, that I'm trying to make here is that we have a vision in front of us for our lives in a lot of cases. It doesn't have to match the vision that I'm portraying up here, but you have a vision within your own self. You might not think you do, but believe me, it matches your purpose, and everyone has a purpose. Why? Because Spirit has demonstrated on the outside that everything has a purpose. Why would we be different than that? Are we some kind of cosmic anomaly, or are we part of the infinite structure of all? Of course we're part. We only believe in one. So the point is that you have a purpose in your life, and I wonder how many times you've traded it off. How many times you've allowed the minutiae of your being to allow you to be able to sidetrack where you're headed and where you're going and what you're attempting to embrace, what you're attempting to create, what you're attempting to bring into being for your purpose. And I'm not talking about cars and houses and money and bank accounts. I'm talking about love. I'm talking about connectivity. I'm talking about unity. I'm talking about the ability to be able to serve and be fulfilled and have a sense of purposefulness in your being and in your life. And we will, when we fit into the mosaic of life in perfection by being authentic and actualized, we will have a world that works for everyone. But we need to start practicing it ourselves. I need to start practicing it myself. And I sway from it all the time. I do. All the time. I'm swaying from it right now. And the thing is that I know and I'm aware of it, but I do a spiritual practice that brings me back and grounds me to what I'm looking at. I used to do it for decades. I was 35 years old when I found this teaching, and I didn't think I had a purpose. I wasn't fulfilled. But the awareness and the awakening that there is that is what drives me forward. And when I put it before me, when I put the moment of my high resolve before me and I head towards that and do not allow myself to be sidetracked, do not allow myself to be taken off the beam, at that particular point, what I'm doing is I'm living a life of fulfillment. I'm living a life of productivity. And I'm sharing it with others so that they can live the same. Because when we all live the same, we'll have created the vision, the larger idea of a world that works for all. It is the driving force. You have to have something in front of you that pulls you, not something behind you that pushes you. And the minutia that shows up is secondary. And as I fall into it, I look at it, then I do my spiritual practice. I remind myself of where I'm going and what I'm doing. I used to take my children to a beach in Southern California when I was in the desert because it was hot. So we would go to the beach, we'd take the motorhome over. It was a beach called San Onofre, a big nuclear reactor there. Glows in the dark. It does. But to get to that beach, there was like a funnel. Everything in Southern California stings, bites, or nettles. Have you noticed? I mean, it's just the nature of it. And so there was this tunnel that went down, or this funnel that went down between two rocks, and you could walk out on the beach. And when you walked out at the end of the funnel, it was only as wide as, maybe twice as wide as where I can put my hands. And then you'd walk out onto the beach into the beautiful Pacific. But to get there, you had to come down the hill. So what they'd done is they had paved a walkway that went like this all the way down into the funnel. And it was all paved, and you would roam out onto the beach. And wherever there wasn't any paving were all these brambles and stickers and things that hurt. And I remember having a dream once of recognizing that my life was like that paved sidewalk. My spiritual practice fit into it and the metaphor. And how it worked is this, is that it's like I'm blind. And here's what my life worked like. I would start off on that pavement. I would start walking down that pavement. And as I walked down it, being blind, when I stepped off of it, I'd get hurt. And I'd, ow. And then instead of stopping, what I would do is panic. And I would start running through the brambles and through the stickers, trying to find the pathway again. Am I making sense? Is this a visual you can understand? And it wasn't until I found this teaching that I realized that once the truth, and the truth is pretty well known by all, we know what the truth is. And I'm not talking about even capital T truth. We know the difference between right and wrong. We know what's correct and incorrect. We know we don't want children to go hungry. We know we don't want war. We know we don't want violence in the world around us. We know that we don't want manipulation. We know that as the very core of our being, the vast majority of us. Jesus, the master teacher, said, those who are poor in spirit will always be with us. But 99% of the people want peace, want harmony, want joy, want life, want light. We want people to have medical care. We want people to have enough money and enough food and enough water to be able to survive easily and comfortably. And that's the nature of who we are. But we're like blind walking down the pathway, and somewhere along the line we stepped off and we panicked and we ran. And now we keep trying to find the pathway. And you get back on it again, you take 3 more steps, and you step off and you get stung again. Does this relate to anybody in this room? And for me, I realized that's what I was doing. And so what I use my spiritual practices do, where I tend the soul of my core and my center, and where you need to tend it here, and where you need to tend it inside you, is to realize that you don't have to panic. That when you step off into the brambles, you stop, you think, and you don't panic and you step back on again. And then you go the next step. And when you step off, you stop, you think, you pray, and you step back on again. And that's how we get to where we're going. We need to have that practice instilled within us on all levels of our life and all levels of our being. We can no longer afford to let one conflictual person take us from the vision. We've done that for thousands of years. Some of it's been manipulative, some of it's been conspiratorial, some of it's been done on purpose, but most of it's done within us. Because we actually allow ourselves to trade away our vision and our purpose for the sake of the minutia, for being right in that moment. I live my life from one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to create a world that works for everyone. And I know the only way I'm going to do that is to keep awakening people who want to be awakened. And I'm witnessing it in the world around me. We're waking up. We really are. We are making incredible progress. We will create this world in our lifetimes if we choose to. And it begins within us. It begins within our understanding that we are the ones who need to bring the healing in. I can't heal the Mideast right now. I can treat for it and do everything else, but I can heal myself. I can find a way to bring myself into the wholeness that I was born to be. And I can find a way to bring the arms of my life into that. Centers for Spiritual Living, the Reading Center, 400 centers around the world. And I can do that diligently. It's within the purview of what I can accomplish within my consciousness and my mind. So I go out and I do it. And I do it. Yeah, I miss my wife. Yeah, I wish I spent more time at home with my grandchildren. But I have a vision. We have a purpose in life. And it is that which is all-encompassing, and that which is all-important. And so I blend my life together with that. And I allow the minutiae of my discomfort to fall by the wayside so that I might stretch and reach out to the larger vision. And I never forget it, and I never drop it, and I never let it go. And I never back down from it, and I'm never frightened from it. I never give up, I never give in. I move towards the vision. I forget it all the time, but I do my practice and step back onto the pavement and take the next step instead of panicking and running through the pain. We can do this as a society, and it begins within doing it by ourselves first. Would you like to set this in prayer? Yes. Would you like to join me in prayer? So let's come together. First and foremost, let's make this a safe place. Understand and know that the only thing that surrounds you at this moment is love. Just allow that love to be the presence, and commit yourself to being honest and open and reflective. Let go of the past and let go of the future, and allow yourself to be in that place where all the power of the universe resides in the present moment. And it's from this present moment that I speak my word. For I believe in God and absolutely nothing else. I know that there is only one thing happening, and that thing is happening in perfection. And that all things and everything that is required for it to unfold and outpicture in its perfection shows up. And I look at it with light and delight, recognizing and knowing that that which I perceive and judge to be conflictual is indeed nothing more than the evolution and the awakening of my being. For I have set in mind the truth, and that truth is that I shall awaken. and I shall live in a world that works for everyone. Accepting and embracing this concept, I know that that higher power, that greater power that is the truth of who I am and the truth of who you are, operates right now in that soul of being, bringing and attracting and manifesting and demonstrating everything that is required in order to make it so. I surrender any idea that from this moment forward I am in control, and instead I recognize and realize and embrace that every activity, whether it be joyful or whether it be sad, is there for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to bring forward the light, the beauty, and the joy of the awakening light within me, within you, and within all. Knowing that the natural result of that, the effect, must be a world that works for all. I accept this, and from this moment forward I am open and speak my word for you, knowing that you realize every time the minutiae enters your life, and that Spirit draws you back to the truth of your being, the truth of your purpose, the truth of your vision. That there has been something that has been awakened in you this morning that has never been before. It is the greater idea that seeks to have you. Accepting, knowing, and understanding that this must be so, I simply give grateful thanks that it is, and I surrender it back to that universal mind that is your mind, my mind, and all mind. And I demand that it be made form in my experience and existence. I let go and I let God, and we ground this by saying together, and so it is. God bless you. Thank you.